Placing the capstone, if there ever was one, on the Great Pyramid would have been a crowning achievement for those ancient geniuses who created their wonder of the world. Although many are fascinated by the capstone for religious or esoteric reasons, this video will depict placing the uppermost stone on top of the Great Pyramid. Our contention is that the capstone was not the last stone set in place. There was other work necessary to finish the Great Pyramid after the capstone was installed. This is consistent with Herodotus when he wrote about the Great Pyramid being built from the bottom up, but was finished from the top down. The capstone on Barge started its journey to the Great Pyramid from the Nile River up the waterlocks. These waterlocks from the Nile River to the building site allow the capstone on Barge to travel quickly and easily to the building site. Like the vast majority of stones, the capstone makes its journey up the series of waterlocks as it travels towards the top of the Great Pyramid. The capstone finishes its journey up this series of waterlocks by entering the uppermost waterlock. The barge with capstone can now move into the wooden temporary enclosure, and then the watertight door is shut. We'll remove one side of the temporary enclosure to better see what is going on inside. The water level in this enclosure is raised up to the necessary height, and additional barges are brought into position. The barge carrying the capstone was built to accommodate the wooden supports which are installed at this time. The capstone is now resting on the two beams which are supported by the two barges. Those barges, floating on the water in the temporary enclosure, are moved so that the capstone is directly over its final location. Water is now allowed to enter these two barges, which gently lowers the capstone down to its final resting place on top of the Great Pyramid. Now that the capstone is in place, the remainder of the stones just under the capstone are set in place. These stones are relatively small and were probably cemented in place using the strong bonding agent the original builders used to bond together other stones. This finishing stonework was done by hand. With the capstone set in place, water and barges are removed from the temporary enclosure. The temporary enclosure is disassembled, and the pieces were brought down the waterlocks, which were still functional. Yet there is still that unfinished area that must be filled in and finished. The unfinished area is filled in by hand. The materials needed to accomplish this are brought up through the waterlocks. This process of filling in by hand continued as the waterlocks up the face of the Great Pyramid were removed and then filled in. This was accomplished by filling in the uppermost waterlock and then filling in the waterlock below it. The waterlocks were still operational, and materials to accomplish this task were brought up the remaining waterlocks. The following animation shows how the waterlocks were built into the casing stones on the top of the casing stones below it. How fascinating it is that Herodotus wrote The Great Pyramid was built from the bottom up, but finished from the top down. The water locks were built directly into the casing stones. This is best illustrated when the water locks are removed. The materials needed to fill in where the water locks were removed is brought up the remaining water locks. When these water locks are systematically removed and the filling in process is completed, the assembly process of the Great Pyramid is finished. Thank you for watching this video series about how the Great Pyramid was built. A tremendous amount of material was covered, and many of the details of the construction process were not fully explored. A few short videos will not answer everything about the Great Pyramid. That is why I have written 2 books which follow this direction of research. These books are Lost Technologies of the Great Pyramid, which is about how the Great Pyramid was built. My other book is titled The Great Pyramid Prosperity Machine, and it is about why the Great Pyramid was built. These books go into much more detail and answer many questions you may have that relate to this research. The Great Pyramid is finished in all its majesty. It is truly a wonder of the world. When completed by the original builders, it was still covered by the beautiful casing stones. It was as Herodotus described it, like an island surrounded by water. Although not shown in the following animation, Herodotus also wrote that the Great Pyramid had an artificial duct connected to it. The following animation shows the Great Pyramid completed as planned by the original builders. This animation shows the groove that the bottom of the wooden temporary enclosure was held in. That groove may have been removed at the time the Great Pyramid was newly built. What an engineering marvel the Great Pyramid is. The Great Pyramid was built using a fascinating, efficient, fast, and powerful construction method. This was how the Great Pyramid was built. But what is more important to our modern civilization and our very troubled world is why the Great Pyramid was built. Our next video series is about why the Great Pyramid was built. This video series will provide a reason which justified the construction of the Great Pyramid. That video series will address a number of things we were unable to explore in this video series. Our next video series will detail how the original builders were able to provide a water supply at the Giza Plateau. Also, the following series describes how those ancient geniuses were able to provide water for the pond and to supply water for the water locks. Our next video series describes how water was delivered over 450 feet higher than the base of the Great Pyramid. I hope you enjoyed this video series and will watch our following series about why the Great Pyramid was built. If you have any questions, please contact the Pharaoh's Pump Foundation through our website at www.thepump.org. Thank you very much.